Welcome to an AnimalCare software professional development series. Our presentation tonight is Learning to Roll with It, using vulva conditioning scores to determine fertility and pregnancy in southern three-banded armadillos, presented by Amanda Arnold, Senior Animal Care Staff from the Frank Buck Zoo.
And so I would like to introduce all of you to Amanda Arnold. She's a senior animal care staff member at the Frank Buck Zoo. And this is the first in a series of kind of like professional development programs that we're going to host through animal care software. And we are focusing facilities that are using our software to gather data and information and hopefully show other facilities on how they could possibly look at using our software as a platform for that. But let me, at this time, let Amanda take over and let's learn to roll with it.
Thank you, Dave. So yeah, like you said, my name is Amanda Arnold. This is a presentation I did for the ZAA conference that was just last week. I have modified this a little bit based on some feedback and questions that I was asked, as well as just maybe added some bonus material for those of you who did decide to kind of join us today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Like Dave said, we are learning to there we go, roll with it. This presentation is how I basically looked at our armadillo's vulva to determine whenever she was fertile and pregnant and whenever our male three-banded would be most interested in copulating with her and when she would be most receptive. And I do work at the Frank Buck Zoo in Gainesville, Texas, in case anyone is not aware of where that is. Some things you should know about me before we get started. I am a great lover of puns. As far as that's concerned, I get it in wherever I can. So a group of armadillos can go by a couple different names. I'm sure we've all heard of like flamingos can go by flamboyance or flock or whatever, but with armadillos, you can call them packs or herds or arrangements, but my favorite is a roll. So moving forward, before we get to know the real stars of the show, I wanted you guys to get to know me a little bit, just kind of know where my background is. I am from Michigan. I graduated from Central Michigan University in 2014. I was hired on the Frank Buck Zoo in 2015. Between graduating and my being hired, I did have a variety of internships. And this presentation is really just about sharing the tribal knowledge. That was kind of a theme of the conference last week, is just being able to share everything. I'm not an expert in three-banded armadillos. This is literally just some observations I made while taking care of our armadillos here at the zoo. And so I'm trying to be humble, but also, broadcast this information. With that being said, here are the real stars. So we have two three-banded armadillos at Frank Buck Zoo. We have an 8-year-old male named Tank and a 10-year-old female named Tink. They are both animal ambassadors, meaning you are not likely to see them on exhibit. We have put them on exhibit from time to time, but generally speaking, you only find them when we do outreach events, when we do our amphitheater programs, birthday parties, etc. So most of the time they do live behind the scenes. They met in 2012 and had their first pup in 2015, and since then have given birth to 7 pups. And because of their success in breeding, ZAA did award the Frank Buck Zoo the Excellence in Breeding Award in 2020. Now, despite that, we have two, animals of the same species. I think, as everyone would agree with, all of our animals have different personalities. And so because of their different personalities, they do kind of serve different interpretational niches. Tank, he can do more hands-on touching encounters, but what he really loves to do is being able to run around and pounce on bugs and show people how cool it is when they walk around on their teeny tiny little, almost like hooves, whatever you want to call them. Versus Tink, she is definitely better at hands-on encounters. And this does showcase how they can curl up into a ball. Now, this picture doesn't even really show up how tightly they can curl up. If she were actually trying to defend herself from a predator, she could kind of tuck in a little bit more than that. And this is generally how we present our armadillos for touching down in this bottom right-hand corner. And yeah. So they have an indoor and an outdoor enclosure. So whenever it is above 60 degrees or below 90 degrees, and this is Fahrenheit, they do live outside. This outdoor enclosure is actually no longer in use. We upgraded them recently, which I will show another picture of that shortly. But the idea is for them to be able to go out, maybe catch some wild bugs in addition to the diet that they are already provided. There is mesh on the bottom of the enclosure to prevent them from being able to dig out. It's just a 1-inch mesh, and that mesh is secured to the sides, so that way they can't dig out and anything else can't dig in. This mesh is on the side of the enclosure is a 2 by 4 inch, but it's covered by chicken wire. And the primary vegetation that's growing in there is a type of cane. I do generally let things grow in there as long as it's not toxic. Something that we do have to worry about that we've seen growing around this area of the zoo is something called a creeping cucumber, which looks innocent enough. I actually thought it was wild grapevine, but then I used iNaturalist to identify it. And it turns out the berries, when they become mature, turn into a laxative. So anyways, we make sure that gets pulled whenever we see that growing. And I do allow grass to grow in there, and we provide different substrates. So out of the time that this picture was taken, there's a lot of grass, there's a lot of hay, there is a lot of sand. I know some facilities really like decomposed granite. You name it, I think I've heard of people using it as a substrate. Now on the left showcases what their indoor enclosure may look like. So this is it's roughly about 150 gallon stock tank with low dust pine shavings. They do get at least one type of enrichment every day. And as far as what enrichment, we do follow Dr. Isabella Clegg's enrichment parameters that if you've used AnimalCare software, I believe you are able to see those. So they get at least something every day. So in this picture, it looks like that day we chose to give them bamboo, but they will also get substrates when they are inside, or little toys or sobables, puzzle feeders, you name it. There's a big variety of different things that they can get. Now, when they are indoors, they are housed separately. However, they get at least one conjugal visit a week, if not more often, as long as Tink isn't currently pregnant or raising a baby. This next slide shows I'm going to call it an upgraded outdoor enclosure. So this has even smaller mesh on the side of it. I would say it's probably from like a 1 by 2 centimeter mesh now. This is a converted old bird enclosure, so you might see some perching up top there, but it still works out pretty well for us. The reason why we upgraded to a smaller mesh is because we were having what we call non-human volunteers try to enter their enclosure. Specifically, I'm talking about rodents trying to go in and feed on or take the armadillo's diet. So we didn't really want any sort of cross-species contamination at that point. This does also include a secondary contamination to prevent any sort of escape. And then there is also a board at the bottom of the door, which also makes it harder for the armadillos to come up to while you're trying to enter or exit the enclosure. There are also several hides in here. One big pine hutch, which they definitely prefer, but there's also some more naturalistic wooden hides that we've kind of converted from whatever we've been able to find around the zoo or the surrounding parks. So for those of you who might not be aware, I think everyone maybe on this presentation is a little bit more aware of it than maybe some of the attendees at the conference last week that I was presenting at, but these are just the very basics of three-banded armadillo breeding. They display a courtship chasing behavior, which I did get on video. So this shows our male tank following our female tink. This is what I would consider rather tame courtship behavior, but I would still count it as courtship behavior since he is showing interest. When he's really interested, he is much more determined, I would say. Right now, he's kind of being like a sweet old puppy dog, but when it's time, you'll know it. After they have successfully copulated, they do give birth to one pup after about 120 days. They can give birth to twins, but it's pretty rare. And from what I've heard, it's generally pretty fatal to all parties. And then around 2.5 months, that pup does start to wean. So this video right here shows the last pup we had starting to eat on some of the Missouri insectivore, which we were really, really excited about. That's what we were looking for to figure out whether or not she was weaning from her mom or not. Our armadillos do get a baseline of Missouri insectivore. We will also give them a dry cat food depending on whether or not we're trying to increase their weight or increase their caloric intake. They get at least one type of invertebrate every day. If we don't include anything they might catch in their outdoor enclosure. So most of the invertebrates we get at the zoo are mealworms, both live and freeze-dried. Same with waxworms, both live and freeze-dried. Crickets, Madagascar hissing cockroaches, grasshoppers, etc. So at least one thing every day. They do also get produce. They get a little bit of banana every day, but then all of their other produce is on a rotating schedule. And then, oh, not what I wanted. And then this is where it gets a little bit more graphic. This is something I was a little hesitant to share with our friends last week. So on here on the left, I was actually able to capture this a couple of weeks ago. This was right after they copulated, and I noticed a whitish clear discharge around our female's vulva after successful copulation. And I was actually able to catch their copulation this time around. Most of the time, we don't have the option to stay around long enough for their courtship behavior to see the resulting copulation. But this actually happened during the keeper chat one day, and I got to stay around and explain it to all of our friends, and was able to get some footage. Now, this video, normally they do, I would say, start sternally, but this was towards the end of the copulation, which did last around 30 minutes for those of you who maybe are curious about that. But this is how it ended, in case you're curious what that might look like for your three-bandeds if you've never seen it. There was someone who wrote a paper a couple of years ago that got published in the Animal Keeper Forum about their three-banded armadillo breeding experience. And they had cameras on their three-bandeds all the time. And generally speaking, their three-bandeds did like to copulate mostly at night. Our three-bandeds, most of the time, are not actually there when they actually copulate, which is why I did develop a vulva condition score system. But anyways, for those of you who are interested, that's what that might look like. So the reason that this whole thing started, I kind of had to explain to some of my friends and family why I was looking at my armadillo's genitalia a lot, because just being a zookeeper didn't cover it as an excuse. We noticed one day when we were taking the armadillos from their outdoor enclosure back to their indoor enclosure for the night, so it was going to get a little too cold, that our female's vulva was swollen, and we were concerned about it. We marked it down just to keep an eye out for it. And it was just something we had kind of kept keeping an eye on, and it occurred to us like we should start tracking this. So back in 2019, before we figured out we could use our friends over at AnimalCare software, we started tracking this manually on paper calendars. And so that's what this picture is over here. We kind of created our system of what levels meant what, and then we would record them every day, as well as we would record other information, such as whether or not they were inside or outside every day, and whether or not we had observed any courtship or copulation. And like I said, most of the time we never observed the copulation. We could only observe the courtship. And so if we saw courtship, we would kind of be like, that's might have been when it happened. But then, so like I said, we started noticing that her vulva would swell in correlation to certain events. So her vulva would swell whenever we had observed a lot of courtship behavior and assumed copulation. We would notice it would swell a lot around the end or beginning of her cycle, and that it would swell and stay swollen for several weeks on end right before she gave birth. I might have a question over here. Oh, thanks, Sharon. Moving on. So this is an infographic I like to use just because it gets a little bit confusing from what I was taught in school, that non-human primates, as well as humans, we have a menstrual cycle, meaning we bleed, versus most other animals have an estrous cycle. However, armadillos do bleed. So this is very fortuitous that three-bandeds aren't three-banded armadillos are on a similar cycle to humans. And so whenever we do have new staff members training in the section, I do like to use this as kind of a discussion tool just to make sure we are all on the same page about tracking her cycles and her pregnancy, especially because I'm aware that not all of us get the same education. And not a lot of people realize that when, you know, females have their period or they start bleeding, that is actually day 1 of their cycle. So again, just so we're all on the same page here. So this is what the vulva condition score chart looked like once we started talking about everything we had looked at. So we would, every time we would look at our vulva, which we did it on a daily basis, and we'll record it on a daily basis. If it was a 1, or if it was not swollen, it was a 1. If we observed some swelling, it was a 2. And if we observed what I'm calling very swollen, maximum swelling, as swollen as it gets, that's a level 3. And then a level 4 isn't actually about how swollen the vulva is. It's just whether or not there was blood present on her vulva. And that would tell us that she is starting a new cycle. And like I mentioned earlier, we would track this in correlation with other events, and we determined that our three-banded armadillo cycled roughly every 4 to 8 weeks. Now, from what I have gathered with other people and their three-bandeds, most of their female three-bandeds do cycle every 4 weeks, but our female would sometimes take up to 8 weeks to cycle. And as far as we're concerned, it's considered normal, just like in humans. You know, some of our cycles might run long or might run short, depending on what's going on. So we started tracking it. We did start training our female for voluntary ultrasound, and we were able to get ultrasounds voluntarily, but she does have very low training motivation. I was never really able to find a reinforcer that was just like crack, if you will, something that she would just consistently go for. So that was something we struggled with, and we're like, well, hypothetically speaking, if this vulva condition score chart tracking works out, we might not necessarily have to rely on a voluntary ultrasound to confirm whether or not she is pregnant. I did talk to another facility that did radiographs or x-rays of their three-banded armadillos to see whether or not they would be able to see a fetus inside of an x-ray, and they were not able to, and they did have a three-banded give birth 3 days later, even though it wasn't caught on the x-ray or radiograph, for anyone who was wondering about that. I did look into another method. Again, it was that same paper that was written a couple years ago. I want to say her name was Rachel Dwyer, where she actually tested the progesterone levels in the fecals of her three-banded armadillo to determine whether or not she was pregnant. And I looked into doing that for our facility. For those of you who aren't aware, we're a pretty small facility. We do have, a veterinarian, but we don't necessarily have all the equipment capable of doing a project like that. So like I said, it was great that this vulva condition score chart ended up working out for us as a way to track her pregnancies and whether or not she was pregnant. Some of those who saw my presentation last week were curious about what our ultrasound stand looked like. And so these are a couple of pictures. So I'm going to try doing this. So what we did was we would put the reinforcement here or on here, and I would target the armadillo here, and she would put her front feet around this blue part. And then the vet would take the tiniest little ultrasound wand that you had ever seen and kind of squeeze it in between here to get to her belly to see whether or not she had a baby. Oh, that didn't do it. There we go. So, like I mentioned, we were recording everything in on paper calendars to determine whether or not she was pregnant, tracking all the vulva condition score levels, whether or not she had been inside or outside, whether or not we had seen courtship or copulation. And we were doing that all manually. And we were already using AnimalCare software. For those of you who aren't aware, Frankfurt Zoo was some of the beta testers for AnimalCare software. And back in 2019, Dave can correct me if I'm wrong about this. I believe at the time they were only doing the weight measurement system, but we had been in talks for a long time about could we do other sorts of measurements on that system? And thus, the 3-banded Armadillo Vulva Condition Score Guide 2020 was born, and we were able to start inputting those values into AnimalCare software every day and then it would kind of pop up a graph like this. Oh, not like that. Well, also like that, but this is what I was talking about. That would allow us to visualize where she was in her cycle. So this is the graph from the last baby that she gave birth to. Her name was Cameron, and she ended up going to the Cameron Park Zoo in Waco, Texas. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, she had a level 4. That was the start of her new cycle. And then she had a level 1. And then she had a couple days where she was level 3. And we're like, oh, that's probably going to be the prime days where Tank was going to be interested. And we were able to get her outside with Tank. And like I said, we didn't observe copulation. We observed a lot of courtship. We weren't able to actually confirm copulation. However, we were able to confirm copulation several months later when she gave birth. So the way I know our armadillo is pregnant is if she goes more than 8 weeks without having a cycle. So you can see all these level 1s over here. That's telling me she's not pregnant. And then for the last several weeks of her pregnancy, she was either a level 2 or a level 3. And it's very normal for us to see a sustained level 3 for the last 2 or 3 weeks of her pregnancy. And then this is another chart that we used. This is kind of our beta version while we were testing out our vulva condition score system. And I like to show this because I think it's a really good example of how important communication is with everyone on your team. So this was the first baby we started officially tracking everything with. You can see here she had a lot of kind of back and forth level 1s and level 2s. And that is because we all kind of had different definitions of what a level 1 was versus what a level 2 was. And it really forced us to kind of iron out exactly what was a level 1 or a level 2. And because of that, what I ended up doing was I ended up taking a lot of pictures of my armadillo's vulva. And I found pictures that I felt like were really great representatives of what that level should look like. And I printed them out and I laminated them and I posted them in our husbandry area. So that way, if the staff were ever confused about what level is my armadillo at today, they can just hold her up next to the picture and be like, that's the level my armadillo is at today. So there were definitely some days where it was, maybe just a little bit swollen, or maybe didn't quite look like this level 1, or they just didn't have a whole lot of experience at looking at your armadillo's vulva and seeing all the ways it can look like on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why this is a little back and forth. But despite that, you can still see the last several weeks of level 3 right here leading up to her giving birth. So once we have figured out that our armadillo is pregnant, we can start watching for signs and preparing her enclosure to give birth in. So something I also felt like I needed to add to this presentation based on some feedback that I got last week. Not every facility separates their males from their females. And we do separate our male from our female. For the last several weeks of pregnancy. They actually figured out, I don't quite remember who, because I talked to so many people last week, but it greatly decreases the chance of neonate fatality if you remove the male from the whole situation. For the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, the first several months of life of the baby, which we were already doing anyway. We never realized the correlation because, like I said, we were just having babies and we didn't understand why it was necessarily so difficult for other facilities. But when she is getting ready to give birth, we do modify her indoor enclosure in a couple of ways. We do add supplemental heat, just so it's a little bit warmer, especially because that neonate is young. It's not going to be super great at thermoregulating or keeping warm. We do drape a towel over the enclosure just to provide a more burrow or den-like experience. And then I did build a custom-made hide that secures to the side of the enclosure because, is it on the next slide? Yeah, because this is what happened with her old enclosure. Whenever she's in the process of nest building, she's dragging hay inside, she's dragging shavings inside. And if you notice, that hide house is moving. This video is a little bit tame, but what was actually an issue sometimes was that she would be so aggressive or motivated or gung-ho about nest building, but sometimes her hide house would move quite dramatically, which was a danger to the pup. Pups are very, very fragile, especially when they're first born, because their carapace hasn't hardened. And if the mom becomes stressed, she will try to relocate the pup. And a lot of times that can also lead to neonate fatality, just because, again, they're very, very fragile. They'll just try to grab onto an arm or a leg or whatever they can get and drag it around to a more safe location in the armadillo's eyes. So this enclosure secures to the side to be able to prevent that hide house from being able to move around when she is nest building. I also, if you notice, I secured it so you can open the top. And if you look very closely, there is a little, I think that one was like a 4-week-old 3-banded armadillo pup right there. There we go. If you look closely in these shadings, it's kind of a little Easter egg. But that allowed us to get eyes on the pup while also decreasing the stress of the mom, not ruining the nest at all, just really being less intrusive overall. Oh, I already saw that video. So code pink is our code for whenever we've had a pup or any sort of baby animal born. And what happens, or this is the protocol for what happens after we call that code. So we don't do any servicing or husbandry for the first week. We try to keep it as hands off as possible because, again, we don't want to stress that mom out. We don't want her to feel like that she needs to relocate her pup. The only interactions we really do is we put new diet in there. We watch for the mom to come out, and that's how we get our positive count on her for the day. I do know other facilities, you might see they do like pictures and they'll get weights immediately. We prefer to be more hands off, but every facility is different and you respect that. This is just the way we like to do things here at Frank Bucks Zoo. And generally speaking, if we don't see the pup, that's good in our eyes because that means mom's not dragging it around trying to relocate it to a new location. Something else I should probably mention is the location where we keep our armadillos is in a shared room with lots of other animal ambassadors. So the several weeks leading up to her giving birth, we will relocate maybe some of the more noisier ones, maybe some of the parrots specifically, since they are so vocal. We don't want them stressing mom out. Once the pup is about a week old, we do start collecting weights, and we just collect them once a week on a weekly basis. And that's when we will start to do just a little bit of housekeeping or spot cleaning whenever it is possible. Our 3-banded armadillo is really, really great about, generally speaking, she kind of sets up her own latrine area by the wheel. So it's been a lot easier to just pick up her fecals then. Her nest box doesn't get super dirty, luckily. We do believe she does consume the fecals of her pup to kind of keep things cleaner like other mammals do. Once the pup is about a month old, we do resume our normal cleaning procedures. And then when we do our weekly weigh-ins of the pup, we will continue, or we will do a little bit more in-depth handling with it, just because all of our 3-banded armadillo pups do go on to become animal ambassadors, because the mission statement of Frank Bucks Zoo is inspiring guests through nature. And so it's really important for us that they can continue the mission by being animal ambassadors and greeting people or teaching people about armadillos and nature. And then once the pup is at least 2 months old, they might start to wean. And we will have to consider whether or not we need to separate from mom, or whether or not maybe their transfer to their new facility will be soon enough that it might not be a concern. I've seen cases where they don't separate from the mom and mom just steals all the baby's food and the baby's not getting enough weight. So that's something you might want to consider when it gets to that point. And then some takeaways so that we learned from this. Communication is very, very important. Like I said, don't be afraid to roll with it or try something new. And just find whatever system works for your facility, for your animal. Like I said, every facility likes to do things a little bit differently. If you want to try to get weights on your pup first thing, that's up to you. Just know the risks associated with it. This is a non-judgment zone. Otherwise, obviously, I have several thanks or thank yous I would like to give out. Susan and Dave Levin have been very instrumental for getting this off the ground. I would love to thank everyone from the Frankfurt Zoo program animal team, and obviously I would like to thank AnimalCare Software. I do have a little bonus video right here of our last baby. I think she was trying to tell mom she wanted to nurse. It might have also been play behavior. Either way, I think she was trying to get mom on her side so she could nurse. I do have a couple of extra bonus slides after this. That was not a part of my presentation last week, but I'll go ahead and look at the group chat. Someone asked, have I ever bottle raised one? And I have not. I'm a part of a Facebook group. I'm going to write it in the message box because it's a little confusing if I say it out loud. It's called Tax Keepers. It has your sloths, it has your armadillos, it has your anteaters and aardvarks and whatnot. I do know there are several people on that group. If you would like to join, that I believe have hand-raised three-banded armadillos. Oh, beautiful. So you're aware of it. But no, we've never had a hand-raised one, luckily. Hopefully I never will need to. I'm knocking on wood right here. I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. So yeah, I guess I can go ahead. You did. That is so cool. Is there anything you would like to share with us or anything you learned about bottle raising your three-banded baby?
I talked to Kate. I helped her as well in the UK, but we did not have the correct formula. So both of ours ended up with metabolic bone disease, but both are doing okay. Mine now lives in Wisconsin at Zoozort Education Company. So I'm really interested in trying to figure out the proper milk. My female is a bad mom and kills every baby. So I need to find a good milk replacement formula. And talking to Kate, she said that she thinks that the three-bandeds are a lot more insectivorous than some of the other species of armadillos.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, ours get insects every single day, as well as the Missouri insectivore diet. I don't know of anyone doing this with their dillos, but I do know some people for their other insectivorous mammals, they like to feed the Rapashi bug gel. Something to think about. I don't know. So I know it's needed more for reptiles, but I know some people are doing it with their Tenrex. So
awesome.
Any other questions or things you'd like to share, or should I move on to my bonus material? Okay, then I'll go ahead and move on. Oh, not what I wanted.
Yeah, and if you want to share your bonus slide. Oh, if you want to share your bonus slides, and then I was going to show them some of the stuff that Amanda started doing in the software was before we released some of our big updates to our welfare templates and our progress report. So I'll show you all what that looks like, and if anybody has any questions after Amanda's done, I will be available to answer questions as well.
Okay. Someone asked me any work on vaginal cytology. I'm going to be honest here, full honesty moment. I need to Google the word cytology. Can you break that down into a word I would understand? I want to say cell, if that's what that means.
If you want to show your slides, I'd see if they'll reply, and then I'll give you the definition there.
Thanks, Dave. Anyways, so I have a series of armadillo vulva pictures. I'll be honest, these are not my best ones. As you can imagine, it can be a little bit difficult of getting good pictures of your armadillo's vulva every single day. And this is part of the learning process. This is why I found it important to have pictures on hand, just so everyone was on the same page. So here's a picture. does anyone want to take a guess as to what level 1 through 3 this is?
Looks like somebody's raising their hand.
Let's see. Go for it. Do you have a guess for
Am I
Josh?
audible? Am I audible, ma'am? Hello?
Hello.
Sure. Hello.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, you're
Yes, sir.
audible.
Yes, so I am Rajesh. I am working on Indian pangolins, not on
Cool.
armadillos.
Mhm.
So we have a conservation breeding center here in India. And I joined here because we are also facing little difficulty to standardize the estrus cycle of Indian pangolins. So, but there is very less kind of no change in this vaginal swelling and all for the species. But there are certain cases where people have studied the cytology, like the cell. They are taking the swab from the vaginal region, and they study the keratinization of the cell. Means,
Wow.
so I think, is there anything? So I joined because I wanted to learn about how you are doing this scoring thing, either through visual or photographs or through vaginal cytology. Because these pangolins are kind of burrowing animal. They live in burrows, so we have provided them soil substrate enclosures. So the thing is, when because we have provided soil substrate, they usually burrow inside, and it's quite difficult to collect the proper swab samples, because everywhere it's dirt. That is the issue with us. But still we are trying different ways to find out things. And now we are going for this fecal sample. We are taking the fecal sample and analyzing the hormonal assay thing we are doing. But physically seeing and verifying it, it's kind of additional way, and it's easier way. So it's still yet to be standardized, but we are working on it. Yeah, thank you.
That sounds much more sophisticated than what I'm doing, I'll be honest. But you keep on figuring that one out. I'm actually really interested to see if you can get any progress on that. So that'd be really cool to maybe apply to other species.
Well, and I will just mention that one of the big focuses on research and science is taking measurables, like when you're able to take samples, whether they be cell samples, blood samples, fecal samples, and then using other forms of measurements, behavior, of course, physical traits like the swelling here, and then start to be able to correlate and be able to sometimes use those behavioral indicators to start looking more closely at a situation too. And in some species that research is just really in the kind of like the beginning stages, especially with species like pangolin, which have not been much in managed care successfully for reproduction anyway. And so, yeah, I think that the more different variables that you can track the females, especially if there's things that can be somewhat hands-off and less managed, then that gives you an advantage, in that sometimes some of all that hands-on interference can cause the animals to say, well, I don't know if we're feeling in the mood right now.
Yes, sir, I totally agree. For pangolins, it's very little known. And we have the only breeding center for this species, the Indian pangolins, Manis crassicaudata, in the world. And we are keeping the pangolins. I am from Nandankanan Zoo It's in the eastern part of India, and here we are keeping pangolins since 67. 1967 we are keeping the pangolins, and we are taking this conservation breeding program since 2009, and we have bred the pangolin 10 times in captivity here. And this regarding the stress cycle and behavioral correlates, we are on it. We are trying to figure it out, but still it's quite difficult, no? So and now we are planning to release one of our captive bred individuals to wild. So things are little slow, but still going on. Let's hope for the best.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And as you know, many of us know here that you know, kind of these conservation projects that lead to reintroductions can literally take decades. And so, you know, I think that your work is going to be very valuable to everybody else out there that are also trying to contribute to the effort of rescuing, you know, the pangolins from, you know, the threatened and extinction status, endangered and extinction status. And so I look forward to sharing more information with you and also hearing back from you. That's absolutely amazing.
The last thing I want to add regarding the bottle feeding, bottle raising of these armadillos. I have not dealt with armadillos, but we have hand-reared one of our pangolin pup with Royal Canin baby dog milk powder stage 1. We have given the reconstituted milk formula, Royal Canin. So it's manufactured in France. So we used that. It's a kind of popular brand for canids. So that may be one of or useful for armadillos. Maybe, I don't know exactly, because their biology may kind of different from pangolins. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing.
Well,
Anyways,
I appreciate the knowledge that we're sharing here, and that was one of the purposes behind starting this kind of professional development webinar series, is that bringing together people from across the globe, hopefully, to be able to share information like this. And so, yeah, if you don't mind, Rajesh, maybe putting in the chat the name of that milk replacing product. It's definitely worth some other facilities exploring and trying, especially if they can get either that product or something similar that you all have used with the pangolin. So Amanda, did you have any more slides?
Oh, I did. I kind of forgot that that's what we're doing today. Anyways, this is a very poor picture of what I would consider a level 2 vulva. So if you compare this picture to the picture on the slide several slides ago, let's see if I can find it. You'll notice the orientation of the picture is a lot different than the one here. We figured out is really, really important for us to take a picture at this angle and try not to get any of her legs in the way, blocking the vulva. So this is a level 1 right here versus if you compare it to here, you can see some swelling, but I do understand this foot really does obscure most of the view right there. This next picture, I would also consider a level 2. This was taken on a different date. A lot of people just wanted me to show pictures of vulvas. So this is what this portion of the program is right now, is what does your vulva look like? So this is another level 2. This one is really, really hard to tell but this is a level 3. If you look closely, there is swelling so much that this almost forms a straight, oh, not what I wanted, a straight line from, let's see, let's use the drawing tool. From here, the tip of her vulva to here is very puffy. It's almost a straight line, especially when you compare it to how it looked on this last slide where there's some layers. And when you compare it to a level 1 where it's almost like a tent or just like even just like a spike, I guess. And then this last picture, someone asked me for a level 4 vulva picture where really it just means there's the presence of blood around your vulva. I understand this isn't the greatest picture again, just because there's that foot in the way. It's very difficult to get these pictures because it's very much dependent on how cooperative your armadillo is feeling. But there is some blood you see here on her belly, and we're like, oh, well, normally that would come from her vulva. Normally the blood would actually be more around her vulva, but you can see this is like a level 2 vulva, almost bordering on a level 3 with how swollen it is. And then we saw the blood and we're like, okay, she's not pregnant. She just started her new cycle. So that tells us that we need to restart our countdown essentially. And then what else? Oh, this is just a fun video. I think this might be the last slide. Yeah, that was the last slide. This is just a fun video. Our armadillos do have wheels, all of them, and these are wheels actually made for chinchillas, but they seem to work really, really great for 3-bandeds. And this is our last baby trying to play with mom and her playing on the wheel. But otherwise, this is officially the end, unless we have more questions or conversation we would like to have. And I did see that Rajesh did post a link to an article, it looks like. So hopefully that'll be helpful information, especially for those of us who have had to hand raise a 3-banded baby.
And Amanda, if you want to end your screen share, I will show everyone just a little bit about what we did in the software, because our total goal with AnimalCare software is really just to listen to the goals of the facilities. Let's see here, this stuff, yes, there we go. And give them the tools that they need.
I did have one more question.
Yeah, and we can keep taking questions.
Yeah, someone was asking how soon does the cycle begin again? And actually, in order to show that, can you pull up her vulva chart? So I have seen her cycle again while she's nursing a pup. I want to say it happened like 4 to 6 weeks after giving birth, if that makes sense.
Oh, the graph. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the graph. That's what I meant. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So let me pull that up here. I might have to reset the parameters here. So the way that the entries put in now with AnimalCare software is that you can create these templates that collect these customizable measurements, and of course this is the customized score right here that
Did we lose you, Dave?
Created. No, I'm here. Can you not hear me? Oh, can you hear me now?
Okay. Well, oh, is he back?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Gotcha. So I don't know if my screen share will pick back up here, but obviously I disappeared for a moment. So can you see my screen, Amanda?
Yes, I can.
So, we put that chart and those pictures into like a little information icon here that when they're trying to put in the score, they can actually view that. Then you can expand this so you can actually see the comparisons. And I think that that you can clearly see the different levels going forward, and that you can easily define it for staff members. But ultimately, the tool is meant to be used on a regular basis. So when they enter in items, they can go in here and they can pick a start date and end date. And I think these dates will still work just fine.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking for when she first cycled after she had her last pup, which I believe was in 2020.
So in 2020, so here's when you saw the different levels, right? I'll zoom in here.
Yeah. So if you notice, there's big gaps in data right there, and that's just because when she does have her pups, like I said, we're very non-interactive. We don't look at her vulva at all. We don't pick her up. We don't do anything. So that's why there's big data gaps right there. But you noticed, where was that one? That was May. So that might have been actually 2 months after she had her last pup for that one.
Yes, and then you see this, the 4s up here, and then the long period of 1s again, and then this would have been the this was probably the last birth right here, maybe.
Yeah, that was Cameron, and I think the one before it was Gulf.
Yeah, so this is 2020 right here still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she ended up having 2 pups in 2020 just because we were trying to have it where she only had 1 pup, but Tank had other ideas.
So just so everyone has a little background, the welfare management tool that we built is really a customizable tool for facilities to track anything that they want. And I've already talked to Amanda about some other things that they might add on to tracking as measurements so that they can run comparisons off of there. And also setting in goals. So this is on the template here where you can put in images so you can have that information, but then actually you can start to use the goals function of the software so that you can set an indicator for whenever this reaches like a certain number, right? That you can set at a target range, so everyone can start looking to see. Let's start measuring now that she had the 4, right? When you set that as a target or something outside the range, that then you can start looking and counting the days to make sure you keep track of your 8-week period. So I just wanted to share that briefly. And if anybody has any questions for Amanda or myself, certainly go ahead and if you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to put them in the chat. And I see most of it is kudos for you, Amanda.
This wouldn't have been possible without a great team.
Amanda, do you have a contact email if anybody wants to contact you with questions?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pop it in the chat. I might actually add 2 because sometimes the spam blocker at work is not cool.
I just wanted to give another kudos, but I can't seem to figure out how to raise my hand.
Thank you.
No, the presentation was awesome, and I think the format's great. And David, it's really nice to see the presentation of the information, the data, and then do what you're doing here, which is to go show us how it was developed in the software. And I think it's really inspiring, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've really just scratched the surface on what's possible, especially with some of these customized measurements. And there's several of the staff members at the Frank Buck Zoo that have taken on projects of tracking things with bears and prairie dogs and a number of other species. And so we really look forward to seeing how this tool is used and get feedback, and developing more powerful tools to add on to that, adding layers to these measurements and modifiers for some of these measurements when they're selected, we feel is going to be really important. And so those are some of the things that we're working on right now.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. right. Anybody else? We will hopefully have some more of these, and we'll send out emails just announcing them and who the guest is going to be and what the topic and presentation is going to be about. If any of you have any suggestions or ideas for future webinars or presentations, certainly please forward them on to me. And my email is just dave@animalcaresoftware.com in case you think of any questions or comments for after our presentation. But I certainly appreciate everybody joining, and especially like to thank Amanda Arnold just for not only her presentation tonight, but her dedication to the care of her animals and furthering the knowledge that we have of that species. Because that's in the end what we're really trying to accomplish here, is to improve the care of animals in human care, which also hopefully understands our understanding of the animals in the wild, to better preserve them as well. Much like Rajesh, and I hope I'm not pronouncing your name too poorly here. That's really what this is all about, is all of us working together to accomplish that goal. So thank you, Amanda. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you all.
Please never hesitate to contact me for assistance at dave@animalcaresoftware.com. Click here to subscribe to more helpful how-to videos from Animal Care Software.